All right, commissioners, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
We're recording.
Good morning, everybody. This is a meeting of the Boulder County Commissioners. It is November 10th, 2021. All three commissioners are present, and we're here today for a public meeting. So no public comment, just information on the Arpa community engagement results and recommendations, which you may have been aware of. A lot of outreach has taken place, and we're going to hear a report today. So Amy, do you want to jump in?
Bernice?
Go ahead, Amy.
Hello, sorry, I couldn't hear Amy. Para todos aquellos que están escuchando este seminario en línea en español, por favor, les sugiero que aprieten el botoncito de abajo donde está el globito que dice interpretación y elijan el español para que puedan escuchar esta conversación en castellano. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Berenice. Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Good morning, commissioners, staff, and members of the public. On behalf of the Boulder County ARPA Steering Committee, who represent over 200 organizations, we're excited that you invited us today to present the findings of the 6-week public engagement process to help direct the county's federal recovery dollars. I am Amy Chester from Rebuild by Design, and I'd like to first thank Tatiana Hernandez and the Community Foundation for Boulder County for supporting this work. Thank you, Tatiana, for being a great partner. This is our agenda for this morning. We'll introduce ourselves. We'll explain the process of the steering committee, the process which the steering committee co-led. We'll share the outcomes of our engagement, discuss what we learned, and offer our recommendations to the Boulder County Board of Commissioners. Please hold questions until the end.
I am Charlotte Lasasso, Director of Boulder County Arts Alliance, joined by Soledad Diaz, our Communications Manager.
We are joined here today by the ARPA Steering Committee. ARPA stands for the American Rescue Act, also known as the federal funding to help communities build back from the pandemic. The county invited organizations who reflected the diversity and the communities affected by COVID and with strong grassroots foundations and relationships. I am Becky Chavez from Front Range Community College and ask that the other committee members introduce themselves.
I just did, but again, Charlotte Lasasso and Soledad Diaz, Boulder County Arts Alliance.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Rebecca Navinger, Community Services Alliance.
Good morning, everybody. This is Berenice Garcetelles from the Latino Chamber of Commerce and the Northwest Chamber Alliance. I'm here with my colleague, John Taylor from the Boulder Chamber.
Good morning. This is Chris Current, and I'm here with Katrina Harms from the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services Alliance.
Good morning. I'm Johanna Lawton from Rebuild by Design.
Hi, everybody. Tatiana Hernandez, CEO of the Community Foundation, Boulder County.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Naisa Garita, and I'm the community specialist, engagement specialist for Boulder County.
Boulder County wanted to understand how they can address the effects of COVID on the entire community and how to build assets, strength, and resilience to address the disparities that have become apparent during the pandemic and to provide measurable and equitable outcomes. Partners drove the structure of the outreach, and they came together to co-create the process because they know best how to engage with their communities and to collect feedback. The goals of the process are as follows. To ensure that the disproportionate effects of COVID on certain communities are mitigated for the future by building assets, strengths, and resilience. To provide robust opportunities for community engagement around distribution of ARPA funds to promote an inclusive government process. To understand residents' experiences to inform long-term planning for Boulder County, and to be transparent, equitable, and inclusive.
Rebecca, we can't hear you. You're coming in and out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. The commission made it clear to us that their focus would be on those who were most affected. The first thing the steering committee did was to identify what that means. We examined the county's general data and translated it into this. You can see that our target populations range from frontline workers to organizations who cannot staff, to seniors in isolation, and to mothers. We then discussed organizations within the county who can help us reach those populations, and from there expanded our list. Next slide, please. We then discussed how we wanted to engage with these communities and collected best practices to ensure we were engaging in ways that were respectful and empathetic, and were clear on how they could affect the outcome of this process. Members of the steering committee drew on our professional and personal experiences, and through these discussions, identified high-level goals that would help support the level of engagement we were seeking. What is interesting is that while the respective organizations we represented were all from very different industries, there was a lot of overlap and synergy in the best practices we collectively identified. Next slide, please.
We had a very tight calendar for the engagement process. We kicked off the effort in late August and needed to finish up collecting data by mid-October to line up with the county's budget process. Knowing that we could not rely on in-person events with the COVID Delta variant on the rise and another lockdown highly probable, we decided that the best way to do this outreach was through a questionnaire, even though there were many surveys before and possibly even survey fatigue. So we knew we would have to work hard to overcome that. A survey was created by the partners, tested and translated into Spanish and Nepalese for the whole community to use. Partners pushed out the survey in their newsletters and events. The county pushed the survey through social media and their many boards.
If everybody could please state your name before speaking and who you're with. Some people on the phone don't know, and we have this for the record, so thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
This is Amy Chester again. We wanted to make sure that we selected a high goal for our surveys, since that would be the main form of engagement. Though we're not trying to create a survey whose respondents were precisely the demographics of those who are affected by this process, we checked in with experts to understand how many survey responses would be a respectable number, and we learned that it would be 1,000 to 1,500 would reflect this community. We piggybacked on existing events, both public and private, and created new events to ensure that we reached our audiences. The events followed a similar discussion as the survey, so we were able to capture and code all the feedback using the Arpa guidelines. We then set a goal of 1,500 surveys and 30 events. We created materials that were responsive to our partners' needs, which included an easy to remember URL, bouldercountysurvey.com, flyers, posters, and postcards. We also created a kit for nonprofit leaders to use that included an agenda and a script for their own community engagement meetings.
Isa Garita. Collectively, the steering committee added events to a shared calendar. Then county staff, myself and Ignacio, attended public events and did outreach to populations such as the Latinx, mountain region, people with disabilities, LGBTQ, communities of color, and businesses that often feel overlooked or unheard by the government. I was able to build confidence in the process by speaking directly to the community, by listening and helping them to fill out the survey and hearing their stories. For example, I went to our center and I was able to help many community members to fill out the survey and hear their story. I was humbled to be able to hear their stories, even though some communities do not feel comfortable sharing any information. For example, another example of this was dedicating time to walk and engage many businesses and their customers. Walking on the street and talking to employees was a great way to show commitment on our end, that their voices are important and that we were there to bring their input into this process. Even though we were collecting a lot of surveys, we found that many people did not want to answer. They thought that their voices would not matter or that in the end, nothing will end up happening that will benefit the lives of residents in Boulder County. We reviewed the demographics of surveys weekly to ensure that we were meeting our goals, and if we were not, we will double down efforts in a specific geographies. We did not review the responses until after the survey was closed. Next slide. The hard work by all of our partners paid off. We surpassed our goals of 1,500 surveys and attended or organized 41 events. During this process, we reached out to over 300 organizations.
Hi, Johanna Lawton, Rebuild by Design. So we had 81% of the participants provide demographic information, which helped us identify how we were doing with our target populations and where there was need for improvement in future outreach efforts. Of those responses, participants were predominantly white. 14% of participants identified as being of Latino, Latina, Spanish, or Hispanic heritage. Having bilingual cultural brokers played a key role in engaging the Latin community. We did not, however, have a high percentage of the Nepalese community participate, indicating that in future outreach processes, it would be useful to engage Nepalese cultural brokers as well. We had 11% identify as having a disability or accessibility needs. 28% of participants indicated that they are frontline workers. Our survey participants were predominantly female, and while studies indicate that women are generally more likely to fill out surveys, this still suggests that future outreach processes should make a greater effort to engage other genders as well. So the highest number of responses came from Longmont, followed by the city of Boulder. And we were really pleased to see a high number of responses come from West Boulder County Mountain Region. Our partners at Peak to Peak did an extraordinary effort to engage the mountain community, and especially considering that they are often overlooked or harder to reach in engagement processes. Surveys were distributed at the food pantry, at weekly movie nights, at the local theater, at farmers markets, and all sorts of other places that people frequent. All right, 1 second, sorry. So we started the survey with a general question, asking respondents about their greatest challenges living in Boulder. Responses from the survey indicate that negative economic impacts, affordable housing, cost of living, public health, and childcare are the leading challenges facing the Boulder County community. Negative economic impacts, affordable housing, and the cost of living are the top 3 concerns across age, gender, race, ethnicity, geography, employment status, and disability status. In some instances, we did find that affordable housing was the top ranked category within a particular demographic. However, is usually only between 1 to 2 point difference. So generally they were pretty much neck and neck. While affordable housing and economic impacts are the predominant issues facing the public, the pandemic responses indicate an increase in the following challenging areas: public health, especially mental health services, as well as childcare and the cost of living. This is consistent across responses, regardless of race, ethnicity, and gender. And we found that a lot of the responses were very similar, including things such as getting priced out of the county due to the high cost of housing, pandemic-related job losses causing households to fall back on rent or mortgage payments, overcrowding in single-family units, property taxes increasing at an exponential rate, wages only covering the cost of rent or mortgage, leaving families unable to pay for food, utilities, transportation, education, school, and medical care, forcing more and more families to rely on nonprofits. A majority of the respondents said that through COVID, family and loved ones, friends, neighbors, and jobs were the top 4 supports most frequently relied on during the pandemic. However, we did find that within the Latinx community who filled out the Spanish survey, local nonprofits and community organizations were the most commonly relied on support throughout the pandemic. The Latinx population was particularly hard to reach at first. In our first few weeks of collecting surveys, our Spanish survey numbers were very low, and knowing that they are among the hardest hit, we refocused our efforts. AISA contacted many trusted local nonprofits and hung posters at local businesses in Longmont, Boulder, and Lafayette to hear their voices and experiences. And I'll now hand it over to Berenice to discuss where we go from here using the insights from the survey as well as community conversations.
Thank you, Joanna. Berenice Garcia Telles from the Latino Chamber of Commerce and the Northwest Chamber Alliance. Everyone, buenos días para los que escuchan en español. Everyone, the results are very clear, and I believe many of us already knew about it. These issues just got pronounced, highlighted during COVID. Affordable housing for the people who live and work in Boulder County. Fair childcare, the job crisis, especially for the small businesses, nonprofits, and childcare centers. It's very difficult for them to compete with livable wages that big companies are providing. So, and also the social isolation that some communities are feeling. We need to provide tangible results for the people who live, work, and have a business in Boulder County, for them to trust this process, for them to see that their input is going somewhere that will produce long-term solutions to address some of the challenges I mentioned to you. I provide, and I had a deep analysis on the responses that our community members provide. Some of them are saying, why not to get a break in property taxes or sales tax? Why not to have a collaboration with big businesses to create a fund for affordable housing? I believe other cities in the US are doing this, like in Seattle, Facebook is collaborating with the city to create these funds. Why not change the requirements for a childcare subsidy? And why not investing in communities, especially the mountains, to fight isolations? Bring the technology. I recall one of our members here told us that the only dental office in one of the towns in the mountains was closing due to the pandemic. Imagine what will cost to the people living there. So think about it. We have an opportunity to address these issues. And of course, attracted a workforce, provided incentives. As I mentioned before, it's very challenging for the small guys, businesses, nonprofits, childcares to pay a salary and compete with big businesses. We need to create incentives to help them retain staff. And already Joanna mentioned this, nonprofits. They are our rock stars. We need to continue supporting them or increase support because they were our frontline workers last year and during the recovery, and we are seeing it, that cases are increasing. I'm pretty sure these nonprofits will go back and help communities. And Isa and Joanna mentioned it, the Latinx community, they rely a lot on nonprofits. It was key for these nonprofits, and they are able to survive thanks to the support that nonprofits are doing. And finally, and I believe my partners, Katrina and Chris, will touch more on this, and the social isolation, especially in the mountains. We need to invest to change these neighborhoods, to bring technology, infrastructure, economic investments. And we have an opportunity to use this input to be inclusive, equitable. And I believe that Boulder County wants to address these inequities, working with all of us. And now I give the room to John. I don't know if you want to add something else. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just briefly, building off of some of the comments that Berenice offered, but then also the rest of the group. And two things. One, I just would suggest that as you're hearing, there are both short-term gaps to fill. No question, there are businesses that are still struggling out there. They need support to continue going forward. That for them is a long-term impact. But there also is the opportunity here for transformational change that in areas, as Berenice outlined, that have been perennial challenges for residents, for our workforce, and for our businesses, everything from childcare to the high-speed internet technology, et cetera. So let's think about how do we invest, how do we leverage resources that are coming down from the federal government to impact those long-term events. And then the second thing I'll offer is just the notion that we come to you as the Northwest Chamber Alliance, and in recognition that we aren't a monolithic entity. The businesses are reflective of the diversity of our community. And what has been so encouraging about this process is the outreach to that diverse business community. I would offer that encouragement that we continue along those lines, and that there is that continual communication with the diverse business community around their different needs. And that's large businesses as well as our small independent businesses. So those are just the additional comments I'd offer.
Chris?
John, did you identify yourself before you spoke? I'm not sure you did.
I'm sorry, not here with the Boulder Chamber, also with this chamber. Berenice set me up. So that was kind of
Chris Current, Peak to Peak. The last question that the county asked was the single action that could be taken. And housing came in as the most important response across all geographic areas. However, in some of the urban areas, the suggestion regarding childcare, and as Bernice said, the importance of supporting our nonprofits. In the more western Boulder County towns and communities, we also saw an increase in suggestions for small business support. On this slide, there are some of the ideas that came from the surveys, some of which were really important for resilience after the fires and the floods. And so we have this background of coming together as community to support one another through these events. And we should build on what we already have. We've been given a clear direction that the intersection of housing and economic issues, mental health and social isolation be addressed in phase 2. Solving for housing and economic issues has the potential to resolve other issues faced by families, artists, and business owners. If housing was more affordable, the cost of living would decrease, the strain on families would decrease, the strain on business costs would decrease, and our mental health in our communities would be more improved. We also believe that we have to deal with the distrust of government through transparency. And that's part of our reporting here. And also demonstrating that the diversity of our communities matters and that their voices matter. And that's part of the reason we had such a diverse group of people involved in providing these surveys in multiple communities and reaching as far into the corners of Boulder County as we could so that every voice is heard. It made a big difference. There's a lot of skepticism from folks in the mountains when it comes to information being requested just by Boulder. But when we were able to put everybody's logo on the surveys, it was much more inclusive and we got a better response. Katrina?
Katrina Harms, Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services Alliance. Though affordable housing is prevalent across all demographics, the need for affordable housing is prevalent across all demographics. The county must also address specific challenges that are prevalent in specific communities like the mountain community I represent. Bringing technology access to mountain communities create social programs for those who are isolated due to geography, health, or physical and cognitive ability, small businesses and nonprofit organizations who cannot expand their workforce, those who have struggled with mental health. It is also important to note that not all survey responses indicated a need for new services, but rather suggested an improved system for navigating the services and programs already available throughout the county was needed. Boulder County has lots of human services programs and opportunities for assistance, but they are only good as the community's ability to know they exist or have access to them. Lastly, we would like to leave you with some thoughts on outreach. We know that the county is dedicated to engaging better with its residents. The steering committee, which was an amazing opportunity for the Peak to Peak Alliance, had collected a few thoughts. The steering committee collected a few thoughts that we hope can help you in the future. There are others in the report. In order to build trust in local government, commissioners should commit to attending events throughout the county. Our communities want to see that you understand our needs. I know that this happened to some extent and more pre-pandemic, and I hope that it becomes the norm again and maybe a little more often. Ensure that you offer multiple ways to engage. There is still a digital divide. From residents in the mountain communities to seniors, there are a lot of members of our communities who do not have access to the internet or do not feel comfortable participating in Zoom meetings. Different audiences need different engagement materials and methods of outreach. Cookie cutter approaches, while efficient, may not reach the population that hover around the edges of society. Invest in multiple local full-time engagement specialists who can learn from different cultures, life experiences, and identities, and who can work nights and weekends to engage with people where they are. Need to know outreach is hard work. I think we all know this. And you have to keep working at it to get the engagement you set out to achieve. Consider applying this model of co-designing engagement process that we use through this Arpa process to other funding opportunities or projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, partners. We're so thankful for all that we have done together to give the residents, businesses, and students of Boulder County, particularly those who have suffered the most, a voice in this process. Before we start the questions, I'd love to just ask Tatiana Hernandez from the Boulder Community Foundation if you'd like to add anything. The Boulder Community Foundation, through a grant from the Knight Foundation, supported this work. Tatiana?
Thank you,
Put you on the
Amy.
spot.
Thank you, Amy. From Community Foundation. Thank the commissioners, Build by Design, our steering committee, and all of our partner organizations for going on this learning journey together. We've just shared a lot of information with you. Before we open a discussion, I wonder if the commissioners might want to share any questions or reflections they have on what was presented today.
I'll jump in real quick here. I want to recognize Marta Loachman, who the commissioner really took this on and made it go and worked with the contractor and did great work to come up with this much involvement in these results. And so thank you, Marta, for that great effort on behalf of Boulder County.
So thank you. And yeah, Marta, you know, you really took this on and spearheaded it. And I know on top of everything else that the three of us have on our plates, you made sure that this process was inclusive. And I know you were at a lot of events to try to distribute those postcards along with Aisa and Ignacio. So this was a lot of information, all of it really, really good. That very last slide that I think Katrina was presenting about engagement, the advice for the county commissioners on engagement, that may be my strongest takeaway from this, because this was a success. Well, the success will be in what we, you know, how we're able to push those funds out consistent with what you all have presented to us. And that will be a challenge. But the breadth of your outreach, the range of responses you were able to get, just the extent of engagement was incredible. And we, you know, you did that with a lot of effort. And that last slide about what we need to do to bring this model to a lot of other things that we do is really important for us, because People don't feel that we're out there. They don't feel we listen. That what commissioners do especially is kind of mysterious. If you look at our calendars, there's a lot of time where what all it says is administrative meetings. What are we doing in those meetings? Who are we talking to? What decisions are we making? How does the mountain community have input? Non-English speaking people have input. People with disabilities who have other obstacles and barriers to engagement. And so in addition to the fabulous input you're giving us specifically on ARPA, I think there's some really, really important lessons for us on how we do our work. And I know we've talked about physically wanting to go into other communities, go to those communities instead of having them come to us to just share what's important. We want to do that, and I think we can do that and should resume doing that. So I just found your presentation powerful, the work that you did, so incredibly important. And but we're not done, and by any means, because we've got to bring all of these ideas down to the ground and have them show up in the services we fund, the new ideas we try to put out, the way that we can engage the community in this co-creation process. So to me, this is the first step. It was a lot of effort by a lot of people, but it really is just the first step.
Right. I will just in ask for a quick reflection. Similarly, there's a couple questions that I wrote down as you all were presenting. First of all, thank you, Community Foundation Boulder County, for reaching out to us at Boulder County and offering this collaboration to really look at how we would use American Rescue Plan Act funding here locally. And there's some significant opportunities, and the information and the takeaways and the conversations and action that we can all collectively do together with these amazing partner agencies for each one of you. And just a reminder for folks who may have jumped in the middle of this conversation, that the partner agencies that were chosen really specifically as cultural brokers, as multilingual, as multiracial, as inclusive organizations who are very well connected. But we're talking about work from these organizations that represent more than 200 area agencies and did outreach with more than 330 organizations. So I just want to make sure that that's really clear. That is the work that you all, as panelists today, have done for us, on behalf of us and with us. The two questions that, and we won't go into them as much as just for what I'm taking away. One is, how do we at Boulder County government, in our commissioner's office and throughout each of our departments, continue inclusive community engagement? The other one was, how do we create opportunities for community to know about the resources that do exist? We have great work being done, and we heard time and time again out on the ground talking with folks in different sectors from the mountains to the plains in Boulder County in this process that folks didn't know about some of the COVID-19 specific resources that are out there and exist. So to me, that's the challenge and the opportunity for us in local government to respond differently, to do things differently, to look at some opportunities of how do we continue these relationships, and how do we make sure that the team of community engagement, wherever it is in county government, is made up of local folks who know our communities, who are already connected, who really understand some of these dynamics and all the different sectors that were talked about today. So just a shout out, that a thank you to all of you partner agencies who volunteered and took a significant amount of time to assist us in this process. And thank you to Rebuild by Design for the facilitation as well. Well, thank you to all of those commissioners for the comments and reflections. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions and time for us to dig into the results, and certainly a phase 2 of engagement should we want to continue with this. I think back to when I came to the commissioners and other municipal agencies to present this community engagement opportunity. At the time, I mentioned that community engagement does occur at various departments throughout the county and other government agencies, and to varying degrees of equity across the region. Besides town halls, however, this process was very new for the county, particularly at the commissioner level. And so we are so grateful for your openness to the process. As Commissioner Luchman and Commissioner Levy just said, the ARPA funding presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our county to allocate funding in an equitable way for long-term impact. However, doing this type of engagement does not need to be once in a lifetime. What elements of the process can be integrated, maintained on a daily basis, what can be improved upon, and have the process or its findings been valuable to you as commissioners? How might this inform the way you engage the public moving forward? These are questions for you to consider, and clearly you see those questions even in some of the responses. Most importantly, I just want to thank you again for your receptivity to engage the community directly with all of us. It is, I think, a huge step forward for us as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana, for stepping forward with the Community Foundation to help fund this effort, and I think it really paid off. And also thank you to the community organizations that pitched in. It's a lot of work. You got a full plate and being asked to do extra stuff. And thanks. And then all the people that took the time to do the survey and give input. It's all great. And I agree with the comments that Marta and Claire said too. You know, it's such an important thing to do. My question, and I'm trying to talk slower for the interpreters, I keep forgetting, but my question is, those are broad categories of things. Housing, for instance, is a very big category and very large. And we have a real opportunity, $63 million, a subset of that, because we had some immediate needs, but $63 million, and we have to spend it over 4 years, and it goes away. So what would be those transformational things in those top categories? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is, this continues, and I think the people on the call would want to know how that might look going forward.
I'll jump in here, and if anyone wants to jump in after me, you're absolutely welcome to. So we were charged with the first phase of finding out really who is suffering, who is still suffering, and what are the broad categories where the commission can make the biggest impact. We do have more results. We're going to release the report next Thursday, and you'll get to see all of the details. We also have 1,500 surveys, over 1,500 surveys, which you are welcome to take a look at too. They have lots of ideas, but for this presentation, we wanted to create the biggest bucket. We plan to spend the phase 2, which is essentially between now and January, February, talking to experts, talking to the communities that are suffering the most, and talking to you and your staff and the different commissioners about how we can achieve this. So we plan to go kind of deeper in specific categories. What we're looking for you is some direction. You know, are we going to look deeper in affordable housing, economic impact, and the other top 3, or do you want to keep it a little bit narrow? So that's for you to think about. You don't have to tell us today, but after you read the results, to give us that feedback. And then we are absolutely dedicated to work with you to figure out how we can create another transparent, inclusive process that is also equitable for phase 2, to create the policies, programs, and projects that will address these issues.
I wanted to, I'm sorry, Commissioner Jones, were you finished?
Yeah, I just wanted to summarize. So the short story is, we're not done. We'll be continuing to ask the community, now that we know these broad big buckets, what specifically is the most high leverage? And I would add, and I've heard this before from the commissioners and people doing this work, what things can we kind of transform so when the money runs out, things keep going forward with an improved service delivery to people who need it. So that's the short story for anybody who's listening in. We're not done yet. We don't even have the Treasury guidance, by the way, the final Treasury guidance. We're waiting on that. You need that to make sure you dot the i's and cross the t's. We learned that from the flood that we went through and federal government FEMA work. So we're not done yet. Thanks again for everybody doing this work, and it's exciting. It really is. It's a great opportunity for the county.
So I just had really one other thought to throw out, and you know, on this issue of now, you know, taking all of this input and figuring out how to be most transformative and impactful. That's a word I vowed I would never use in my vocabulary, but suddenly I can't think of the other word with this money. And as important as sort of these top 3, maybe 5 issues are, and it's no surprise that housing is up there. It's no surprise that mental health is up there, that the economic challenges are. I don't want us to lose track of some of the things we can do that may be fairly small dollar, but that matter to people, or they may not be small dollar. But you know, we'll probably want to be looking at you know, several what we've been calling just big buckets of money, but there may be some opportunities for some very small targeted uses that could have a big impact. And so I don't know whether, you know, as we sift through your survey responses and continue to get feedback from the community, feedback from our department heads, the Human Services Alliance, all of those folks, that, you know, there may be some opportunities for, you know, for smaller investments. That, you know, the issue of small businesses and the challenges of triple net leases and property taxes, that's a tough one. That's been a long-standing problem, exacerbated in COVID when revenues were down. A thing, you know, I was meeting earlier this week with Boulder County Housing and Human Services staff, and something that I know AFA has been interested in around just an income floor for families living in poverty in Boulder County, and whether if the if Congress passes the Build Back Better bill and is able to extend the generous EITC and increase the child tax credit, does that lessen the amount of money that we might need to put into a cash support that could lift all children out of poverty in Boulder County? You know, there are opportunities like that we just can't let go by. So, you know, I think we're going to have these things to balance, and I don't want some of these other ideas to fall through the cracks.
Commissioner Levy.
Do you want to go, Tatiana?
Thank you. Tatiana Hernandez, Community Foundation, Boulder County again. An excellent point. And I think this is the opportunity for us to put it all on the table or on a whiteboard and weave. One of the findings of the report, and I think Katrina said it perfectly, that the programs and offerings that are being provided, whether it's through federal dollars or county dollars or cities, municipalities, et cetera, are only as good as people's access to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So how we put the entire constellation of what is available on the board and say, how do we help people navigate this labyrinth, I think is going to be critically important to the success of all of the efforts.
And if I can jump into Amy Chester from Rebuild by Design. Thank you, Commissioner Levy. I absolutely agree with you, and I'm glad you brought up some of the small things that can be done. I'd also like to raise that there are large things that might be able to be done that can tick multiple boxes. How do we create programs that will have multiple benefits so our dollars go further? And I think that is one of the prisms that we should examine the investment for the next phase. Secondly, I just want to remind everyone, which I think we all as a group had to be reminded as partners when we looked at the responses the first time. I don't think anybody was surprised to see housing. But I think it took us another moment to remember that housing is an arts issue. Housing is a small business issue. Housing is, a mom's issue. And that comes through when you start reading the responses more than just the coding. So we did have to create some type of coding in order to take 1,500 responses and make it something that we can report on. However, there's so much great information that's in there, and behind all of those 1,500 responses are real people that are suffering in many ways. And it's very interesting, though not shocking, to see that housing and cost of living were really 1 and 2, but they're almost the same thing. You can almost think of them as the same thing. If you solve for housing, then cost of living will go down. So I think that we have to think about all of these things comprehensively, and in the projects and programs and policies that we propose, think about how are they going to help everybody who's suffering.
Yeah, and just one other, I guess, I should have organized all my thoughts, except there was so much information coming and my brain was too stimulated to organize it. But just, one other thought on these issues that are sort of concealed by, so there's housing, but, that had ripple effects. Thanks to our family resource networks and our food banks, community food chairs and others, people didn't go hungry. But all of that extra effort during the real depths of the pandemic, I think has concealed food insecurity as a problem in Boulder County. You all patched things, not you, well, the nonprofit organizations that I saw in the participant list kept people from going hungry. But that's a kind of effort that can't be sustained going forward. And we have to look at, what were the systemic problems that led to such vulnerability to food insecurity in the first place. And so it was interesting to me that hunger and food insecurity didn't show up on your top issues, but I think it's really only because of the unprecedented effort that community nonprofits made to keep people from going hungry. So we know that there are other issues and vulnerabilities in our county that maybe didn't show up, but only, because of generosity.
So just to remind everybody, please state your name and your organization when you speak. I think John has his hand up.
Yeah, just a quick point. And John Terre with the Boulder Chamber, the Northwest Chamber Alliance, and it's it capsulized in a word, leverage. There are resources that are also coming through federal and state funds, and we want to make sure that as we're considering taking on some of these major challenges, that we're not feeling like Boulder County needs to solve this in isolation, but holding on to some resources that are then going to match dollars and make a more attractive proposal for, be it housing funding, be it childcare programs that are out there, that would allow us to stretch our dollars. So just have that leverage is an important concept we want to hold on to.
Absolutely, and I'll also remind everyone that there is money that goes to the state from Arpa funding, and there's money that go to local towns and cities. So this has to be one piece of the big puzzle.
Yeah, and we're paying attention to the maze of state funding. It's very hard to track, but you're right. We can leverage off that, and if there's more federal money coming in these new bills, that's great. Are there questions? We have these folks on here. It's a real opportunity to hear more from them.
I can ask questions all day long. I am watching the clock as well, but I would love to hear from partner agencies who may have, like, what is it that how will you feel like the work that you have put into this process with Boulder County feel like a success 12 months from now or 24 months from now, specific to the goals of your group working on this community engagement?
Maybe I could just kind of throw the question to different people. So let's start with Front Range Community College. Becky, putting you on the spot since you were the first one to speak and it's been a while now.
Hi, this is Becky Chavez, Front Range Community College. I think being able to, one, engage our students and our faculty and staff more in the process as we're having the conversations. Housing is definitely something that is hitting our students like nothing else, including even just finding that temporary transition housing between, oh my goodness, my lease just ended, but I haven't been approved for my low income housing. What am I going to do for me and my child? And so being able to know the resources. So when our students are unable, and our faculty and staff are unable to meet their basic needs, what are those resources that we can connect with, and how can we, and I'm saying this as me and as an institution, not the whole institution, and just me, of how can we look at what Front Range is doing with our federal fundings. Sorry, Andy Dorsey. And working in connection with this as well. So just like John said earlier, is leveraging these partnerships. We as a community college can't do the work that we do in serving our students and serving our community without these partnerships. So I think this is a really great start. And our students definitely enjoy being at the table and having their voices heard.
Thank you.
Soledad or Charlotte, do you have anything you want to add? The Arts Foundation?
Well, really everything that Becky said, I agree with. We need to get, make sure that people's voices are being heard. Really for the arts community, I think the way we gauge success is typically through funding. So, and an ability to continue operations. So I think if in a few years from now, if we can see that we haven't lost many artists to other cities that are more affordable, or organizations are staying open, facilities are staying open, I think that will be a sign of success. It's really just business as usual almost. If that exists in a few years, then this has worked.
Thank you.
Rebecca Navinger, do you want to go next?
Can you turn on my volume?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you great
Okay.
now.
My Zoom is freezing up a little bit. So Rebecca Navinger with Human Services Alliance. HSA is made up of the nonprofit organizations in Boulder County. There's about 70 of us. What I'm thinking about this morning, Commissioner Lokeman, to answer your question is, we touched on this already, the fact that the nonprofit community has been essential throughout this pandemic. We're still in the pandemic. The employees of these organizations never left the office. They have been there in the front lines, supporting people during some of the most difficult days they've experienced, and they continue to do that. The ramifications of that are in front of us now. We have significant compassion fatigue amongst those dedicated to this type of work. It's difficult for us to address that with the limited resources that we have in a non-pandemic time. Nonprofit organizations rely on fixed funding. We cannot cost shift. And so when we look around us and we see the labor market becoming increasingly inaccessible to us, we can't compete with Starbucks and Costco and department stores raising their starting rate of pay. We have an erosion to the infrastructure, a significant erosion to the infrastructure of safety net services that we are saying are so essential right now to people who are disproportionately impacted by this pandemic, to this point and into the future. And so a year from now, when I think about what success looks like from the nonprofit community, I want to be in a place where we can see that we've made meaningful investment in the infrastructure supporting the nonprofit community. Affordable housing certainly is an issue, and for employees who have a career in the nonprofit world, their wages are far less than for-profit organizations, and they certainly experience that. Nonprofits experience that at the infrastructure level. So thank you for allowing me to share my comments on that.
Thank you.
Chris and Katrina.
Yeah, and we need to stop at 11, just so you know.
I think we can make it. We have 3 more people to speak. Kristen,
I'll be-
Katrina, do you have anything to add?
I do have something, and that is the digital divide. The digital divide is so significant in the mountains. It's absurd for us to be able to talk to one another along the peak to peak. We've had Sean Bleem and Ryan been working on this for a year, and I still am not seeing any significant improvement in connectivity, and it's frustrating for all of us. That's really one area that I would like to see improved and really had some success with, so that there was that better communication and better networking. Folks that have tried to apply for services down below have no ability to be able to send it because there isn't, they can't stay connected. They get a call from Boulder County saying that they missed something and try to call Boulder County back to figure out what it is. And it's a big deal to get to where there's signal to be able to call. So those are challenges that mountain residents face, and that I'm sure a lot of Boulder County residents face, because Zoom and internet is not as stable as we all would like it to be across the whole county.
Thank you. It's also a safety issue, of course. You don't have phone lines. Very, very quick, Berenice and John, one thing you can add?
I echo Becky's, Rebecca's, Katrina's thoughts. I think they have say everything. I just want to add a very small comment. I want to have something tangible that I can get back to the small businesses or Latino businesses and tell them, look, your input is here, and we're going to create these programs to make sure that we have results for you for a long-term transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last word, I'm actually going to ask Aisa. She's probably not expecting this, but Aisa, you were hired to help do outreach for the county, and you saw a lot. What would you look for in the next few years to know that this was a success?
Well, Isa, Garita for the community engagement. Yeah, I saw a lot, and but the biggest thing for me is just accountability, just for what we did, that we created this process and that we went and asked, and that we are really looking at this input and creating programs that will really benefit the lives of all communities in the county. I saw a lot, and it's a lot happening, and I don't want to put one bucket on things to happen, but just it was hard to build the confidence on this process to community members around the county to believe that we're going to listen, we're going to create this, we're going to get the help out. So yeah, just building that trust. Yeah.
Thank you, Aisa. And Aisa has really, really touching stories talking about helping fill out the survey for people that don't have homes and for people who can't read themselves. So thank you. Commissioners, it's yours now. Last minute.
So it's 11 o'clock, and I wish we had more time. I think we have a big debt of thanks to all the work that's happened, and Commissioner Loachman's leadership on this. And we just thank you for doing it. We realize there are real challenges in the community, and you highlighted it, and they're starting to give us some direction so that we can maybe make some lasting change after this money is no longer available. So other commissioners, you want to jump in real quick?
Just want to say thank you to everybody, and thanks for the participants that were listening in. And bouldercounty.org is the website, and we do have an Arpa website page, and this information will be there as a recording to share out. So thank you, and everyone take care of themselves.
Yep. I'll just say thank you, and thanks for all your effort. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.